So this is the video for the assembly of my upgrade kit to the guy Manuel. So you have the upgraded chin piece and the upgraded LED pieces. So right now what we're going to start with is this main board, which houses the microcontroller, which controls all these four boards. So we're going to start by first mounting the 16 megahertz crystal into its spot and bend the leads, and then the 18 picofarad capacitors, which go here. One goes here and the other one goes there. And don't worry about the polarity, these are non-polarized, they don't explode, so everything should be fine. Okay, and bend the leads, like so. Okay, and now we're going to mount the 47 ohm resistors. You could also use 330 ohm. The range for these resistors for these LEDs is 1K to around 330 ohms, and yeah. So you don't have to buy exactly 470 or 330 or 1K resistors. You could buy somewhere in the middle, but little note is that the smaller the resistor, the smaller the resistance value, the brighter the LEDs will be. And I found that 470 works really well, but you could go down to about 330 ohms. Alright, so to mount these, just bend it into U-shape and put them in each one of these holes. So there's the first one, and I'm going to go ahead and place the other ones, and just bend the leads out of the way. Alright, so looks like a mess, but we're going to go ahead and solder all these components into place. To solder these, it's pretty easy to do. So what you need to do is just grab your soldering iron, pick a joint, grab your solder. So we're going to pick this one. So just apply some heat to the joint and apply some solder. And that one is soldered. And you should have something that looks like that. And go ahead and solder all the other leads. So once you have all these soldered, take your flush cutters and just trim all these leads. Remember the eye protection, because when you cut these tend to fly off, and if it hits your eye, it doesn't feel so good. So go ahead and trim all these leads. And you should have something that looks like this and like that, with all the resistors, these two capacitors, and this crystal oscillator soldered. So now we're going to move on to soldering these 5 LEDs. Alright, and so first you have to place these, of course. So the longer side of the LED goes on the left, and the shorter side on the right. So you can see there's a little flat part on the stencil here. Flat part here, here, and that's where the shorter leg of the LED goes. If you also look at the LED, there's a little flat section here, and that should also match up with the stencil. But sometimes LED manufacturers, especially of really cheap LEDs, they mess that up, but they mess up the flat side on the short side of the leg, so just watch out for that. So remember, long on the left, short on the right. And then go ahead and solder these into place. And then trim all these leads. And the last two components we need to solder is the 22 microfarad and the 0.1 microfarad capacitors. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to take the ceramic capacitor here. This is the 0.1 microfarad. And we're going to place it at the top here. The polarity doesn't matter, it's ceramic, non-polarized. So just place it like so, bend the leads. So now we're going to mount the other capacitor, and be careful as these are polarized, and you can see that there is a longer lead and a shorter lead. The shorter lead coincides with the negative stripe, and the longer lead does not have a stripe on that side. So the longer lead is the positive, the shorter lead is the negative. And if you look at the circuit board, you can see a tiny little plus and a tiny little minus. Plus should be on the left and minus should be on the right. So take your capacitor, and we're going to mount this from the other side. So you want to put the capacitor through like so. So with the longer lead on the left and the shorter lead on the right. So I'm going to place it like so. Just bend it a little bit so it's out of the way. So with that capacitor placed, you will have a black stripe on the left when you're looking at the board this way. And so the stripe was on this side, and this side coincides with the negative here. This board is done. So just trim these LEDs and you're completely done with this board. Set this board aside, and then we're going to move on to the smaller board, which is the right piece. This, if I hadn't mentioned it, is the left earpiece. So again, for this board, all you need is the 5 LEDs and the 5 resistors. So I'm going to start with the resistors again. Again, bend it in U shape, and then just place it on the board, like so. So the resistors are placed. Now I'm just going to solder all these resistors. And then just trim all these leads. And now we're going to place all the diodes. And now we're going to solder all these LEDs. And remember, when you're placing the diodes, the longer lead is where the curvy side of the stencil, and the shorter lead is on the flat side of the stencil. And now trim all these LEDs, and you will be done with this right earpiece. So this one's done. We're going to set that aside. So now we're going to move on to the left and right upgrade chin pieces. So as you can see, they're kind of mirrors of each other. See, this one goes up here and this one goes up here. So yeah, so I'm just going to start with the right one. So what you need to do is first mount the Max 7219 chip. You can also use a Max 7221. Doesn't really matter. So if you look at the board, there's no label, no marking for the chip. So this is kind of crucial. So you have the chip here, and you have the resistors here. So this chip goes on the bottom, right? So it goes on the bottom with the little notch on the chip facing where the resistors are. So I'll explain that in 1 second. So we have the resistors here, right? 47 ohm resistors, and the chip on the other side has the notch facing them. So make sure you're on the right chin piece, the chip, Max 7219 chip, has the notch facing the resistors. If it doesn't, your chip will simply not work, and most likely all these LEDs are just going to be lit, or perhaps you might damage the chip because you would be applying reverse polarity to it, which is not very good for the chip. So yeah, once again, the notch here on the side with the resistors on the bottom. not on the top. Don't place the chip like this, place it like that. Okay, so enough of me blabbing. I'm going to go ahead and solder all these pins on this chip. And now you will need your two 47 ohm resistors, and we're going to place them right there. So again, bend them into U shape and just place. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and solder these. And then trim the leads. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and start with the top LEDs. They are 5mm straw hat LEDs, just like the ones I use for the earpieces. So once again, long side curved, short side flats, and go ahead and populate the top and the bottom row of this chin piece, the right chin piece. And now that the top two rows are populated, I'm going to go ahead and solder and trim all these LEDs. And now we're going to move on to soldering the rectangular LEDs. So these are a little bit trickier maybe to do, since there are a lot more of them and they're kind of packed together. So what I suggest to do is just do the top row, and then the row after that, and then the row after that, etc., etc., until you've soldered all these LEDs. So you could again, these are LEDs, they're polarized, you need to put them in the right way. So you can see on the PCB here, we have a little darker bold stencil here, and it's a little bit lighter everywhere else. So what you need to do is you put the long side without the, you put the short side with the on the bold side, and the long side where there is no bold mark. So just like so. So again, that was longer leg on the left, shorter leg on the right, and just like so. I have the top one populated, and there's a little trick to bending these LEDs, so I'm going to bend the leads that way. So I'm just going to kind of place my thumb here and then bend all these LEDs. Okay, so they're kind of uneven, but that's okay, we could fix that later. So flip the LEDs over and solder the top row. And trim all these leads of the LEDs. And now we're going to do the next row, again with the shorter leg on the right with the little bold mark. And again, solder and trim. And then just proceed on populating all these rows. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and then pick up when all these have been soldered.